You're listening to Market the Brew, a leading resource for promoting and marketing craft beer. Join in as we share with you, straight from the source, tools and strategies craft brewers from around the country are using right now to achieve significant success. Please welcome your hosts, Danielle and Travis Clevin.
Hello and welcome back to the Market the Brew podcast. I'm Scott Schmidt, founder of Promote the Brew and the Market the Brew podcast. And for the first few episodes, I'm also going to be co-host of the podcast. Our podcasts are available at marketthebrew.com and other podcast sites like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We'll also be posting video of each of these podcasts to our Promote the Brew YouTube channel. So whether you're choosing to listen through a traditional podcast site or watching and listening through the YouTube channel, you have several options to follow and listen to us. We also hope that you will follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And those links are in the podcast notes on the Market the Brew website. With us today are the new hosts of the Market the Brew podcast, Danielle and Travis Clevin, and someone many in the craft beer industry are very familiar with, Andrew Coplon. For those of you who do not know Andrew, he's the founder of Secret Hopper and is the founder and administrator of the Craft Beer Professionals group on Facebook. And if you're not a member of this group yet, I strongly suggest that you join the group to stay on top of current and relevant topics of discussion in the craft beer community. And so now that all the introductions are out of the way, let's start with a few questions to get Andrew talking about what he does. So a little precursor here is back in November of 2017, we did a podcast interview with a brewer who is using the Secret Hopper platform and the data that they were collecting to improve the experience within the tap room. So it wasn't an actual podcast with Andrew, but somebody actually using the product. And so, Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about Secret Hopper, how you got it started, what it does, and what it's been doing since we did the last podcast?
Oh, wow. That is a lot of loaded questions right there. No, we could probably fill an hour with just those. Well, everyone, thanks for having me. It's really hard to believe that it was 4 years ago that you did that episode. I remember when we first connected, and since then we've got to know each other virtually. We've got to have beers in Denver, and it's been a great time. But we launched Secret Hopper in 2017 simply as a mystery shopping company for breweries. The goal is to help breweries create more memorable and profitable experiences. And at that time, there were only 5,000 breweries, and now there are only 9,000 breweries. So I think the need has, only increased to find ways to differentiate and create more, memorable and profitable brewery experiences, because those experiences are but for the staff and everybody you interact with. So it's been a fun few years of growing, and feel free to throw any more questions my way.
Do you find that the COVID shutdown and the return to somewhat normalcy increases the need for a Secret Hopper program for breweries to really understand who their customers are and what they want and how they're viewing the experience they're getting in the tap room?
That's a fantastic question, Scott, because like all brewery tap rooms in March 2020, our business completely shut down. So I was spending a lot of time with people like you and others on Zoom, and I wouldn't say it's increased the need. I think it's kind of changed the goals of a brewery tap room visit. Right now we've learned, especially the past couple of years, that customers, have different expectations when they come to a brewery. Early pandemic, they were very concerned with the sanitation levels, whether or not people were wearing masks, social distancing, and things like that. Things have evolved. So I think that really speaks to the customers we're trying to serve. We need to know what they're looking for. If they're looking for a warm, heated outdoor patio and, in cold Wisconsin, and they show up and there's not a space heater there, they're going to get a little confused and upset. You really need to prepare your guest for what you're looking for. And right now, as the world transitions back to a better place, brewery visits are somewhat more intentional. I think we're all going out a little more frequently now, but with people going out less, it's even more so important that you blow your mind when they make that decision to come visit your brewery. Because if they visit your brewery and they haven't visited in 2 years, and they don't have an overly positive experience, guess what? When they decide to go out next month, they're probably going to pick another brewery because yours didn't stand out. So it really all comes back to that time and place where you're trying to make that, first great impression, whether it's the first great impression for a guest just getting into the craft beer, or that first impression all over again for a guest who hasn't visited you in 2 years. I think you really need to understand your guest expectations and completely exceed them.
Well said. And I think that any brewery that is struggling really needs to take a look at the secret hopper and listen to what their customers are telling them, to improve, to make that experience even better.
And Scott, with regard to brewery experiences, every brewery experience is different. That's what I love so much about craft beer. You can go to 25 different tap rooms within 25 miles of your house. Everyone will have something else different that stands out. So, when we work with breweries, we want to customize to their goals. We don't want any brewery to feel like it's a cookie cutter experience. We want to figure out what their goals are for both their guests, for both their staff, and how we can make it better. So really, we treat everyone like a one-on-one conversation to see how we can help.
Okay. Well, before we move on to the next subject, what's the best way people can learn more about Secret Hopper?
Yeah, they can simply go to secrethopper.com, secrethopper.com. And for everyone listening, we'd love to kind of send a free Secret Hopper out to your brewery to kind of give a snapshot of what's going on. So secrethopper.com, or Andrew at secrethopper.com as well.
Perfect. All right, and I'm going to let Danielle and Travis ask a few questions here, as they're going to be the new hosts of the Market the Brew podcast.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Danielle and Travis. So nice to meet you both.
Yes, nice to meet you. So we heard a little bit about the Craft Beer Professionals page. What can people find in this group?
Well, so I launched Craft Beer Professionals at the same time, a couple months after we launched Secret Hopper, merely as a means for people like all of us and brewery owners and people working in the space to connect on Facebook, because for better or worse, we're all spending way too much time on social media. I mean, you guys are a little active on Instagram, right?
We are.
So we just merely created Craft Beer Professionals as a community for people to connect. The whole goal was to provide a space where people who maybe couldn't go to craft beer conferences or guild events, or really had the opportunity to connect with people outside of their general areas, could have those conversations. Because the more we're talking to people, especially those in other places, potentially in similar positions, the more we can learn from one another. So the goal really is to create these conversations between people in the industry, but also put out a lot of valuable educational content. There's so much we can learn from one another, and there's so much we can learn from industry experts. And Scott, you put out a great presentation a while back on retail merchandising success, and you talked about strategies, in a 30-minute segment that brewery tap rooms can use to maximize, that tap room space for merchandise. So our goal is to find every area we can, from the brewing side to the business side, and put this content out there so that way it lives as a resource that anyone can access at any point for 100% free.
Well, and it looks like there's so many different people in your group, with so many different backgrounds and experiences to share. How many people are in your group?
It's crazy to believe, but 14,000 people. It's grown completely organically over time. I think it demonstrates the need for these conversations.
Yeah. And through your group, you've also had a lot of video conferences in the last few years. How are those going?
Yeah, so we're a weird organization. Most organizations start in person. I've started right here in my little office. So, when the pandemic hit, we had always been putting out the educational content. We've been doing talks every Tuesday at 11 a.m. pretty religiously, Eastern time. So all of you folks on the, Midwest and West have to get up a little bit earlier. But we started in April 2020 doing virtual conferences. Our whole premise was, even with the world shut down, we need to be having these, workshops and conferences to provide value to people, so it's still so much we can learn and take advantage of this time when we're sitting at home together. And of course, we're not still sitting at home as much as we were 2 years ago. But when we first started, we had a completely engaged audience. So we did 3 days in April 2020, 50 plus sessions. I sat at my computer for a really long time and just coordinated this. And it was fantastic because I got to build so many great relationships with the presenters, but we also put this content out there for everyone to enjoy and learn from. And we're about to start our 5th virtual conference in April. It's going to be April 4th, 5th, and 6th. Once again, 100% free, accessible to all. And it's really interesting how things have changed. As I mentioned, 2 years ago, we were all stuck at home and just soaking in any opportunity to connect and learn. Now people are working again. So no one's going to sit at their computer for, 7 hours on a Monday and just, watch me and others talk about beer related things. So we've kind of positioned it as, yeah, you can definitely tune in live and you can ask questions and learn if you're able to make it. And we would love for you to do that. But if you can't, guess what? It's going to be there for you forever, whether you want to watch it today or you watch it 5 years from now if the concepts are still relevant.
I guess, what are your next steps for the Secret Hopper and for the Craft Beer Professionals page?
So for Secret Hopper and Craft Beer Professionals, I always try to keep them fairly separate, but somehow they come up in conversations like this together. So like for me personally, 2 years ago, my life was kind of split 80% Secret Hopper, 20% Craft Beer Professionals. I think it's completely flip-flop now. I probably spend 80% of my time on Craft Beer Professionals and 20% Secret Hopper. And a lot of that is because Craft Beer Professionals has grown, but like any business with regard to Secret Hopper, we've really tried to streamline our operations and make things run a little bit smoother. So I think that accounts for, ways we've become more efficient over time. But the goal with Secret Hopper, as more breweries continue to open and more breweries want to fine tune that customer experience. And I think the pandemic has definitely put a little bit more focus on making sure you have that customer experience and that taproom space that's merely wowing people. We just want to help more breweries over time and put out valuable content with regard to Secret Hopper, ways we can help people improve it. If we can be a way that breweries use us to help monitor, maximize, and maintain that customer experience and, overall, just memorable experience in the taproom, we want to help. With regard to Craft Beer Professionals, that's a fun question as well, because as I mentioned, we're this virtual community. We're a weird mix between Facebook and, like a guild of sorts. And our goal is to provide value to everyone in the industry, whether it's people like you all, whether it's the brewery owners, whether it's industry suppliers. We want to make sure there's value for everyone. So we want to continue doing these virtual conferences because they're accessible to everybody. Everybody can come, everybody can learn, doesn't matter where you are, there's no cost involved. But at the same time, we've built this really unique virtual community, people who recognize each other just based off their little name on Facebook. Like Scott and I, we met in Denver and I felt like I knew Scott. We had never met in 4 years until we saw each other out in Denver. And also, one of my best friends in the industry is a guy named Kerry Shumway. Kerry is a CFO at a brewery and he runs Craft Brewery Financial Trading. Just like Scott, Kerry and I talked a billion hours on Zoom, but never met. So when we went to Denver together, we actually were roommates first off. And that was a whole crazy experience, rooming with someone you never met before. But that aside, one day we're having beers and burgers and we're just talking about our families. We talk a little personally on the internet, but when you're having a beer with someone face to face, I think it's a lot easier to kind of take the relationship to the next level. We both learned that our kid has the same name. We both have sons, albeit they're about 18 years apart, that have the exact same name. And we never learned this until we were face to face. And why this is relevant to Craft Beer Professionals, I think there's so many people in our community who've got to know people on the internet, but want to take that relationship to the next level. So what we want to do is not transition what we've built online to in-person, but add an in-person aspect to our repertoire. And we're going to be doing 2 in-person workshops this year in St. Louis, Missouri, which isn't terribly far from you all up there in the Milwaukee area. And we're going to be doing one in my hometown of Norfolk, Virginia, which I believe are both 2 underrated craft beer destinations. And our goal is to bring people together to learn, industry decision makers who have spent the last few years really trying to fine tune their businesses. We want to put everybody in one room, bring 10 really smart people and have 10 great sessions where people can not just, feel like they're in college again and watch someone lecture for an hour, but actually interact, make it a 2-way street, ask questions, make it more workshop style and find ways we can better our businesses together. But that's only half of what we want to do. That workshop component is going to be so great. I'm so excited to learn. But the second half is, Scott, to use you as an example, once again, when we were in Denver, we had a great time. But every time Scott saw it and each other saw it, we saw each other, it was in a crowded tap room. We were yelling in each other's ears, and it was amazing to see him, but it was hard to have a real deep, intimate conversation. So our goal is to bring everybody together 3 nights in a row to have these meaningful networking opportunities where, while we can see each other and that's great, but we can have deep conversations. That first night, say we're getting ready to meet each other for the first time. The second night, we're friends. The third night, we built this relationship where we know we can learn from one another. And while we may have first met each other on the internet, there's now so much more depth to what we've created. And that's our goal, to provide a space for people to network and learn from one another. So that's our goal for 2022 in Craft Beer Professionals. And just like any brewery, our goal is to keep learning and finding ways to innovate.
And I looked at some of the speakers at the conference, and you really do have something for everyone. You have something for people on social media. You have something for people who just visit breweries. You have something for owners. It really is a conference for everybody in the community.
And that's absolutely the goal. So thanks for pointing that out. And one of the reasons we kind of want to do it all in one space is, one of the talks that we're having is White Labs is going to come in and talk about the importance of yeast and fermentation, not just to the brewer, but for everyone in the brewery. For example, the finance people need to be involved, because guess what? Yeast costs money. You need to factor this in when you're planning things. But guess what? People in the tap room, the beer tender serving beer, the more you can describe the parts of the brewing process to the guests across the bar, the deeper connections you can make. So our whole value proposition is that, the more everyone can learn, the better it benefits everyone in your brewery.
Yeah, and that's not just the people in the tap room or in the brewery, it's even the consumers, because as you learn what you like, when you go to other breweries and you ask those questions, then, what style of beer, what type of yeast, what type of hops are in your sweet spot of styles that you like the best. So, if you have somebody that really understands the whole brewing process as a bartender, and they're explaining the beers to you and you can ask questions, the more knowledge on both sides makes that a better experience, I believe.
I 100% agree.
All right.
I was wondering, are there any speakers or at the conference that you're most excited for?
That's an interesting question, because I learned so much, and I'll use the word random information through Craft Beer Professional. Virtually, I'll go to bed some nights and read a thread about technical brewing and things that I never need to know. But the reason I love to read it is maybe one day I'll be talking to someone who has that exact question and I can shed that information to them. So it's fantastic. And with regard to all these presentations, I'm looking forward to them all. What I'm really looking forward to is one we're having in St. Louis. The word community is used so much in craft beer these days, but I think it's thrown around a lot. And I think communities really should represent the areas around your brewery. And with that said, everybody talks about wanting to engage with the community. And I've seen millions of presentations. Well, millions is an exaggeration, but lots of presentations of giving examples of how you can better engage with the community. We don't just want to give examples. We want to give actionable steps people can take to build those relationships with their local communities. So what we have in St. Louis, we have Betsy and Allison from Lady Justice Brewing and Jamar at Noda Brewing. They're going to be coming in, and they're going to talk about ways you can not only, like I said, give examples of ways you can engage with the community, but steps you can take. You can bring your notebook and write down the strategies and actually leave knowing ways you can actually make them happen. So that's one session I'm really excited for. We've got lots of folks coming in because whether we like it or not, a lot of breweries are really diversifying these days. The folks over at Kodo Design are going to come in and talk about, how you can incorporate branding and successfully diversify, your product line. So those are ones I'm really looking forward to in St. Louis. I mean, I could go to the whole lineup because I'm, excited about all of them. But the point is, we're going to give things that apply to everyone in the brewery team. And you're going to leave with actionable strategies that you can take to your brewery to make happen when you leave.
Another thing that Andrew does with the Craft Beer Professionals is once you're in the group and you subscribe, is once a week he takes the top threads and emails them to you along with other pertinent information, so that if you haven't had an opportunity to jump into the group or you miss that thread, you still have an opportunity to read that information, because he pulls it all together and sends it to you, so it's in your inbox on Monday morning. So there's a lot of benefits that Andrew does bring to the craft beer community through the Craft Beer Professionals group.
And that's a really neat thing to point out there, Scott, because, I think those threads just give all of us a really unique pulse of what's important in the industry at that very moment, or at least that past week. And anyone interested, it's update.craftbeerprofessionals.org.
Yep. And I think it's great because if you save those emails, you can go back a year from now and say, you know, what was relevant and important and topics that people were discussing a year ago, and then read the thread from this week and go, you know, where has this gone in that 12 months? You could even do it, you know, quarterly or you know, semi-annually to look at it and say, you know, how is this conversation grown in the year since that other email? So there's a lot of good information in those.
And Scott, if you truly have 100 emails from me in your inbox, I would hate to look at your inbox. That must be a mess.
You should see all the emails I have. Because like you know, what I love about Google, I use Gmail. And what I love about it is when somebody says something or they need something, I can go into the search bar in my Google email and type in that subject and see all the emails that are relevant to that. So like you had said, you know, being able to use that information and share it with somebody, even though you don't have the technical expertise. I have the same thing on my end where somebody may ask a question and I don't know the answer, but I do have access to a database that allows me to draw that information and share it. And so, you know, it's one of the things I learned a long time ago, and I think it was probably from, you know, a Christmas movie. It was at Miracle on 48th Street, where they talked about, you know, how they trained the employees at Gimbals to know where the different items were at the different retailers around town. So if they didn't have a specific gift, they could tell that customer where they could get it at one of their competitors. And what a huge, you know, thing that was back in the day. And I learned from that because you never know when somebody's going to come up with that question and you're going to need that information. And, you know, we've had the conversation. I love data. And so being able to access it so easily and share information for me is just another benefit that we can provide to customers, because, you know, you don't want to spend an hour hitting 18 different people to get an answer. So if I can provide that, or as you know, the Craft Beer Professionals Group can provide that information, it's hugely beneficial.
And it's great you used the word data, because 4 years ago when we were having these conversations about Secret Hopper, I remember when you had the person kind of on the show in like a secret robotic voice to not reveal their identity, which was definitely fun. You know, I think we were talking more just about feedback, but data is really what it is. I think data is a term that we've seen grow, I don't want to say in popularity, but in importance in craft beer, because there's so much we can learn from looking at trends in data, you know, and as our industry continues to evolve and get more focused on the business side of the operation, because obviously you have to make really good beer. But when you can use this data to fine tune all aspects, it just gives you the skills and the tools to improve quicker.
I agree. All right, so I have one last question, and this wasn't on the list of shared questions. So as we were talking about Google, and I know you don't like to blow your own horn, but as I was preparing for our interview, I Googled your name, and I was blown away with the results that came up on the first page, and then the 9 pages that followed. And then we all know that over the years, you've been a huge part of the craft beer industry, and you've really become a voice, not always through your voice, but through the voice of others that you have brought to the forefront through the different sessions and everything. So my question is, as a reluctant craft beer industry influencer, what's next for Andrew Coplon?
Well, I don't normally Google myself very much either, but quick little story. One of my favorite things that I find when I Google myself, my dad was somewhat involved in like helping to implement computers in businesses and schools like in the 90s. And I remember our local newspaper brought me in, and the date is some point in early 1995, to get a first glimpse at the internet. So they literally brought me as like a 9-year-old boy, put me at a computer, and just would see what I found on the internet. And so that's what I like when I Google myself, because that story is kind of funny to me. But, you know, but what's next for me and craft beer professionals? As I mentioned, you know, our goal is to really, you know, add to our repertoire, you know, make these in-person events, you know, something we do regularly. The goal was to initially do 3 in 2022, but the fun state of the world has kind of had us, God forbid, use the word pivot and kind of change it just to 2. But in 2023, which will be here before we know it, we're already looking at where we're going to go. And without committing, because I haven't committed anywhere yet, there's a good chance we may be up in your neck of the woods. So, our goal is to continue to provide value in places that it can be appreciated. So, I'm looking to continue doing our virtual events, to add 3 yearly in-person events to what we do, and just continue to build relationships. Every week I have a little time set on my calendar to kind of look at my goals. And I want to make sure, one, I'm checking off those boxes that are things that I already wanted to do for the year. But every time that I sit down, my mind's going a million miles an hour, and I'm just writing down new things that I want to do. So the goal is always to find new ways to provide value. And I don't know what they'll be beyond 2023, but each year we're looking deep within and trying to find ways we can help more people. So, I love conversations like this, because if there's a pain point someone has, throw it our way. We'll see if we can provide the value or connect you with someone we can. So, just like everyone at a brewery, we're all in the relationship business. And that's one of the best parts about what I do, talking to great people virtually and in person. So hopefully, I can continue to do that and just meet a ton of great people in the craft beer industry. Or maybe even craft beverage industry. I don't know.
Who knows? It's growing, with seltzers and ciders and meads, and it's not just craft beer anymore. Oh, and I forgot, there's low alcohol, there's no alcohol. There's just so many different variations these days that, who knows where this path will take all of us. And before we wrap up, I just have one more quick question is, Andrew, will you be attending the CBC in Minneapolis this year?
I will. I've booked my tickets to go. I've got an Airbnb about a mile away, so hopefully it's not too cold to walk up there. But I can't wait to come to Minneapolis. I've never been before. It's going to be a great opportunity to network with a bunch of wonderful people.
Awesome. Well, if anybody needs to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach you?
I have too many email addresses, either andrew@secrethopper.com or andrew@craftbeerprofessionals.org. Or if you're on Facebook all the time, like I, for better or worse, am, find me in Craft Beer Professionals. You'll probably see my name pop up, Andrew Coplon. Shoot me a message. I love talking to people. So I tell people, find a time. Let's chat for 30 minutes. Let's learn from one another. I love these relationships.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time today, Andrew. And we look forward to seeing you in April at the sessions, as well as hopefully the CBC. Anybody else going to the CBC, make sure you look up Andrew, see if you can't catch him for a pint or two. And if not, join the group, be a part of the conversation, and be a part of the sessions. I think you're going to find that everything you need is available in the Craft Beer Professionals group.
Awesome. Well, Scott, Danielle, and Travis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
We've reached the end of this episode, but there's plenty more to keep you busy. For online source materials and proven case studies delivered right to your inbox, sign up for our mailing list by visiting marketthebrew.com. We'll see you next time on Market the Brew.